Everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming today on this wet Monday. So, Emily, do you all call the meeting to order? Do you want to take the roll?
Sure. And there are a couple of people that I know are planning to be absent, and Gravit being one. So next on the list is Bob Selinger. I don't see yet. Lori Stegman, who I know is not planning to attend. Corky Collier.
Right here.
Hi. Dave Ritma. Eric Mueller.
Here.
Shirley Craddock.
Present.
Eric Molander.
Here.
James Ellison.
Here.
John Niyama.
Here.
Mary Helen Kincaid.
Here.
John L. Bell. Michael Jordan.
Here.
And Steve Fancher is not planning to attend. And then Tanny Stephenson.
Here.
All right, we're good to go.
All right, great. So the first item on the agenda is public comment. And Jim, you're listed on the agenda. I don't know about anybody else that is up today.
Do we have anyone signed up to testify? I don't believe we do.
Not yet.
Nope.
Well, first I want to introduce Keith Hobson, who at least on my screen is in the upper right. Keith has joined us on an interim basis after Nick decided to depart, and I'll let Keith give you just a brief introduction to his amazing background, and we're very fortunate to have Keith. He's been here 3 weeks, is that right, Ish?
Yep.
And already made good progress. So Keith, why don't you tell him a little bit about yourself, and then I'll go into my agenda item.
Sure, thank you, Jim. Well, I wouldn't classify it as amazing, but I do have about 25 years in public administration. I retired about 18 months ago from Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District. I was the Director of Business and Facilities there, managed the administrative functions as well as the planning, design, development, and maintenance of the park facilities there. And before that, 5 years at Washington County doing administration. So brief background, mostly in finance. I'm a CPA, retired, or was practicing CPA before I got it into public administration. So very happy to be here and really enjoying it. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Keith. We are really lucky. He's doing a great job filling in, and we'll come back to you next month with some more updates about our longer term strategies. I felt like it was important to put the flooding and security issues on the agenda since it's a public meeting, and I know that there's been some interest in that topic. And so just very briefly, I want to highlight for you the progress that we've made since the Veterans Day events. What I'm happy to say is we have been successful in removing all the vehicles from around our property. We've successfully placed close to 200 eco blocks, which are those concrete Legos that you see everywhere anymore. And so we have prevented additional access by vehicles onto our property. We have added extra thickness to our pump station door as a precautionary measure. We have purchased ballistic vests for our operations team, and we have hired the services of armed escorts when we're down there. And as a result, we have been successful in operating the pump station on a regular basis. And I think things are better with the crew. It's an ongoing issue for us. So separately, we have reached out to some additional not-for-profits, and we're looking to help increase the outreach to people living there. We continue to work with the city of Portland to make additional plans for additional cleanup at the site and to complete the permitting that we have underway with the Parks Bureau. We've seen some significant progress along Marine Drive recently, particularly just around the 205 interchange where the camp there is gone and has been cleaned up. And we've done an inspection of that site and are preparing to make some repairs there. We continue to coordinate with the port and the city around the rest of Marine Drive, and we've developed an initial prioritized list, and we're working with operations teams from other departments and agencies that need to access those sites The goal being ultimately to work with law enforcement on a modular basis so we can have a beginning and an end to each site, which will help law enforcement provide resources. But we'll notice folks, give them plenty of time, plenty of offers of services, and then we'll go in and ask them to move, and we will clean up the site and ideally secure the site with boulders or eco blocks or bollards to maintain our access going forward. I'm hopeful. We have seen some declines in the numbers of campers. Some of that is probably weather related. Some of it is the ongoing activity by us and by all of our cooperating agencies. So I guess what I'd like to say is slow, steady progress and a very difficult situation. And I'm just grateful for the support of all our partners in trying to help us manage things as best we can. On the safety front, we did bring OSHA in to do a site visit at Pump Station 4 and at our cross levee. We received some initial recommendations from OSHA that we are taking seriously and implementing, and Bill Owen is in the process of working with some private consultants who I think are going to be a little bit better positioned to give us advice that will help our staff feel safer at the site. So again, I think we've made good progress. I want to thank Bill and Randy and legal and Evan and Astor and the whole crew who's really been working hard to try and improve conditions, not only for the people living outside, but for our team, and to stay coordinated with all of our partner agencies. So as a result, we are confident with the current weather forecasts that we have adequate capacity in our system for storage and pumping, so that we shouldn't see any additional flooding based on the forecasts that we have now. However, I just want to remind you all that across the world, we are seeing unprecedented rain events, as much as 2 months of rain in 24 hours. And no matter how successful we are operating our current system, under those conditions, we will see trouble. So we're also starting to gear up about how we can message that more effectively. So if there aren't any questions, we can move on. If there are questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them or ask one of my awesome colleagues to answer them.
D. Shirley Craddock has her hand up. Shirley?
Thank you. Jill, I'm just curious, when you approach the homeless campers, do you bring, does the Office of Homeless Services, do they join you and approach people to help them find shelter and other accommodations?
We are currently working with Cascadia Behavioral Health for our outreach, and we are also beginning some conversations with a nonprofit called Cultivate Initiatives. Cultivate Initiatives appears to have deeper connections with some of the people at Pump Station 4, but we don't currently have outreach from the joint office, but I have been in contact with Mark Jolan, the director of that office, and he's aware of the circumstances, and we're hoping to meet early in the new year to see what the joint office and the additional capacity voters have provided to them can offer.
Yeah, that was my point. I picked up on it, is the funding that the region supported is rolling, and I'm hoping that they are able to use some of that to help approach homeless people, to help them begin to find shelter and support.
Well, I hope to meet with Mark Jolan before your next meeting, so I'll follow up. And I know they're interested in trying to help, and I know they're grateful for us trying to figure out solutions as well. So more to come on that. I just do want to stress that I see Metro, I see the City of Portland, I see the Port of Portland, and I see others beginning the slow grind of gearing back up to do more active management of all of these sites. We'll see how the Omicron virus impacts that. But again, we are seeing an uptick in management activity that's greatly appreciated.
Eric?
So looking at the contract report for November 2021, we have $280,000 for armed security officer services, rapid response, bio cleanup, Cascadia Health. Any idea how much this is costing us on an annual basis to deal with the homeless on our property?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it's considerably less than the number you see in there. What we've attempted to do, based on candidly just a pinch in our procurement system, is that we've made those contracts longer and a little bit larger in order to prevent the need to go back out for RFPs and contracting activity. But if you'd like, I could bring you a number or work with our finance team and get you a number and get it emailed out to you. I don't have the number off the top of my head, and I regret that. Well,
it's one of those things in which this is the face of what we're doing to help solve the homeless crisis. This is our investment, and it's from a public relations standpoint, they need to know that this is what we're spending.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the largest expenses for both the armed security at our campus, which we're doing every night and on weekends, and then for those armed escorts. But the biggest expenditure is going to be for those armed services.
Got it. Thank you.
I'm glad you're going to talk to Mark Jolin, because you said they're slow rolling, but I think they feel like it's lightning speed. But being able to support those businesses that support the public good is one of the things I've heard discussed in a number of things. And also Commissioner Jayapal is very interested in hearing about that. And I encouraged her to get in touch with you and Evan about how she could assist our district, because she's our Multnomah County Commissioner, because I think they know of, but not enough of, and probably hearing what the expense is to the taxpayer might be of interest to them. So I just wanted to say, I said you should talk to them and find out about it. And it was kind of like, oh, so maybe Evan or you want to reach out to them as well.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that. The big challenge in my conversation with Mark earlier this month is honestly finding suitable people to manage sites. They're really struggling to find the capacity and the organizations who have experience to successfully manage complicated situations like this. So it's a very difficult hiring environment. And so I think we should all expect that that's going to take some time to gear up in that capacity, because these situations are really, really complicated. So you can't, you have to have some skilled people involved.
Yeah, but I support the cost that it takes to keep the workers safe, that can keep us safe, because that's sort of in our mission. So I'm not going to say I'm not afraid of what the cost is, but I want to continue to support being able to make their work lives safe.
I guess two other points that I forgot to mention. With the help of Corky Collier, one of your colleagues on the board, we did convene a meeting of local neighborhood businesses right around our headquarters earlier in the month. And we're looking at some shared patrol and additional cameras and creating an information sharing site. But there was a lot of interest among the private parties that are in our neighborhood in joining up in a shared effort. The other thing that I forgot to mention is that State Representative Hudson convened a meeting that included all of the city hall offices and the joint office and some others. It was a staff level conversation. At this point, we gave an overview of all the different roles that these various agencies in the levee system are playing. And Representative Hudson's staff committed to trying to convene an elected officials briefing following the short session of the legislature, probably in late March is when that would happen. And what I would say is, while there was no specifics that came out of that staff level conversation, I do appreciate Representative Hudson, because I do think it elevated the situation with a lot of the city hall offices, which was nice. And again, a lot of support for trying to help come up with solutions.
Okay, thank you. And I know there'll be more questions and discussion of this item as we go. Financial reports. I don't know, Janet, Ben, who's, I don't see Janet on the call, actually.
I think Keith or Ben are gonna jump in. There's not much of a report from last time, I think is what it said in your agenda. So I don't know that we have a finance report. We do have a contracts report.
Yeah, we don't have anything to report on that, but we can certainly answer any questions on the contracts reports.
Okay, thank you.
We do still have some checks left, which is good. I mean, by way of information, we are preparing to make our first request for a draw on the line of credit from the Bureau of Environmental Services. We're planning about a $500,000 initial draw. As we spend down the grant funds, we'll be using the line of credit to employ some of the staff that are working on the urban district. So I'll be switching from the grant over to the line of credit.
Okay, so let's keep moving. The next item is resolution regarding appointing a budget officer. Kelly?
Hi, good afternoon. We pass a budget officer resolution each year. We decided to do this year is a little bit differently so that we wouldn't have to do this each year. For the past couple of years, your fearless leader budget officer has been Casey Short, but with Casey fully retiring, now we have some fresh blood with Ben joining our team. And so we've offered him up as your budget officer. And we've made this semi-permanent so that we're just going to assume that Ben is the budget officer for as long as he's here. And so we don't have to do this every time. So hopefully that works well for you all. Any questions or questions for Ben?
Not yet. No. So if there aren't any questions right now, I'd entertain a motion on resolution 2021-12-01.
Mr. Chair,
Tanny,
I move that we adopt resolution 2021-12-01, appointing a budget officer for the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District.
thank you. Tanny's moved. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second,
All right, I think Corky got in just under the wire there. So Emily, would you call the roll, please?
Corky Collier,
Aye.
Dave Ripma,
Yes.
Eric Mueller,
Yes.
Shirley Craddock, sorry, Shirley, you're still muted.
Earlier on mute.
Sorry, I thought I had unmuted myself. Aye.
Perfect. Eric Molander,
aye.
James Allison,
Yes.
John Niama,
Yes.
Mary Helen Kincaid,
Yes.
Michael Jordan,
Yes,
and Tandy Stephenson.
Yes.
thank you all very much. Good luck, Ben. And the next item on the agenda is Evan Mitchell with the Mission Vision Values Resolution.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Evan Mitchell, Communications Public Affairs Manager. So we shared a draft of the Mission Vision Values with you last month and heard a little bit of feedback, not a ton. So we ran another version with that feedback incorporated by the Mission Vision Values Committee, and are back to talk about it this month. And Corky, I'm going to turn it over to Corky to see if he has anything to say. You're muted, Corky.
You're on mute.
Did that in reverse. I'm happy to make a motion, but I do think we want to discuss it a little bit. Do we want to discuss before the motion or afterwards? What's your preference, Mike?
Why don't we go ahead and put the motion on the table, and then we can have discussion, unless you think it's going to create major amendments.
I'll move for resolution number 2021-12-2 of the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District, adopting mission, vision, and values for the district.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
James Allison, second. And Corky, you have the floor for discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on a couple of comments from last month, I think it was. Ann Gravitz suggested, adding in something about major public infrastructure. And Mike, I believe you suggested adding in collaborative, which it looks like they got in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to check and see how people were feeling about that.
Well,
Is Ann here on the call?
Ann is not today.
No, okay. I looked at it too, and I couldn't really find a good place to add that in. So I guess I'm just wondering, and by the way, hats off to Evan for these things are always so difficult. I was complaining about the sentence structure of the mission statement, but come on, when's the last time you saw a mission statement that was actually constructed properly? So she's been doing a really great job, and staff overall has worked on this very hard. I think it's in pretty good shape unless somebody has something to add to it.
Would it be too much trouble to put a slide of it up on the screen? I'm kind of struggling to find it, and I don't remember that I had.
It's Exhibit A in your packet.
Yeah, I didn't print my packet, sorry. I'll
all
go.
right.
Mike,
Evan, can you share it? Here we go.
Are you seeing the
Yep.
Word document?
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
better.
it's really small. Okay,
Can you make it?
Yeah, you might want to enlarge it a little bit.
sorry.
Oh,
Okay,
oh, that's
Not
enough.
quite that much.
Okay. Does that help, Mary Helen?
yes, sorry to be,
No, that's all right.
No, we want you to be comfortable with this. We really do.
Evan, can you maybe just make sure everybody walk us through?
I guess what I was looking at is what I've always been saying about cultural heritage.
Right.
And I believe that I saw it in there, but I don't know if it was my wishful thinking or, oh, there we go.
Yeah, so we
Or
tried
there's-
to incorporate it in the values section.
Okay,
And in the mission.
I noticed there was a question regarding, do we decide to lead with race? And I've missed some meetings. So what was the discussion around that?
We talked about it some as a team, and we do have both some consultants that are helping us with our equity action plan, and we're going to try and push a race-based message through that. And then we're later on, you're going to hear about some work we're doing to flesh out the equity mandate. So Councillor Craddock, what we talked about was wanting to hold that notion, but also wanting to move forward with this and then trying to incorporate that as we really flesh out the equity program and the equity action plan. But again, we did take careful note of, I think, your thoughtful approach to this. And I share your experience with Metro and think that that may be a really positive way for us to go. So, but it is not reflected directly in this document.
Thank you.
I see Eric and Tanny both. Eric, are you first?
I can go first. So one of the things I think is important is to link the definitions that you have, the guiding principles, definitions, and questions back to this. In effect, it's sort of the legislative history of how we got to this point, and those discussion about what we mean by diversity, equity, inclusion, and racial equity as we saw it at this time is important. So if there's a way that you can have this as an explanatory note, that would be very helpful.
Okay. Tanny, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, my focus is more on the resolution itself. You know, Evan, I was reading in your memo, you know, down in number 1, it says the agency's flood safety role is clear. I would just like to see us in the resolution tie it back a little bit more. If you look at the third whereas, purposes of the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District include contributing, and we go through that. That's exact language from the Senate bill. And so there's 4 sections that are totally versed in there, but the ones that we don't have in there are the first 4, which are reduce the risk of flooding, protect people and property from flood risk, respond to flood emergencies, and convey water for the purpose of flood safety.
So you'd like that represented in the resolution?
Yeah, I would, because it's kind of, that's part of our core mission too. And I think we should kind of hold those together.
Yeah.
So Evan, would you consider adding a whereas that quotes that language or add it to this one?
Yeah, I would add it to that whereas, so it's all together.
It's all in section 1 then?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. And then back to Eric's question. I don't know if you want to actually put anything in the exhibit that references the memo, or how you want to do that actually, or if the memo included in the packet, represents the legislative record.
Yeah, I certainly didn't write that memo with the intent of representing the legislative record, but we could add a note. The primary place where this will live is on our website. So it's certainly easy enough to add a sort of link to a note that provides some of that context and history. I think I might try to draft something and see if it gets at what you're thinking, Eric, and ask for your feedback.
Be happy to give it.
Okay. Any other comments? So we have a motion, a second, and it looks like we're gonna amend the resolution to add the language from 550 that Tanny was referencing. Is that okay with the motion maker and the second to do that?
It's fine with me.
James?
Yes, fine with me as well.
Okay, with
Evan,
that,
are you clear on that addition?
Are you asking me, Corky?
Yeah, I was asking if you're clear on that. Any question about what we're asking you to add in there?
Yeah, we're just adding the first 4 bullets from ORS, the language that describes our missions, to the resolution.
Thank you.
okay, with that change agreed to by the motioner and the second, any other questions or comments? If not, Emily, would you call the roll, please?
Corky Collier,
With a nod toward Emily's work at 7 in the morning on a Sunday, I might add, I vote aye.
Dave Ritma,
Yes.
Eric Mueller,
Yes.
Shirley Craddock,
Aye.
Eric Mullender,
Aye.
James Ellison,
Aye.
John Neoma,
Yes.
Mary Helen Kincaid,
Yes.
Michael Jordan,
Yes.
and Tanny Stephenson.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thank you all, and Evan, good work. That's a really challenging part of our work, our foundational work for the district. And now I think it's a great reference point for all the other discussions we have. We have a place to go back to and say, this is what we're all about. And I really, really appreciate that. It's really important for all the work yet to come. So thank you all. And the folks on the committee, Corky and others, thank you. Okay, the next item is the Revenue Analysis Subcommittee. Colin?
Hello all. I'm going to be giving a couple updates and one proposal, and then handing it over to Evan, who's going to be walking through some of the capital planning all under this agenda item. But to begin with, we have Mark Buckley here from Echo Northwest, who's our consultant for the revenue analysis work, and he's going to provide an update on the project work to date. Then he'll kick it over to me. I'm going to give a quick update on some of the partnership work building that we have been developing for this revenue analysis, as well beyond the revenue analysis, to kind of co-create the programs and projects that we'll need in the years to come. And then a brief proposal on potentially dissolving the committee in favor of using the whole board to move this revenue work forward, and then over to Evan. So with that, I'll share my screen and ask Mark to take it away.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, I appreciate that. as you are probably generally aware, we've got many different tracks going at the same time for this work, and there's quite a bit of integration and interdependencies across other efforts by the district as we scale up. Yeah, you can go ahead and jump right into it for me. Thanks, Colin. Yeah, just as an overview again here that we are in phase one. These are the key bullets in terms of the primary tasks that we have at hand. We've completed the work plan. I'll give you some updates on the communications and engagement plan in a moment, which is also still underway. We have the activities and cost process in terms of understanding what the new district will be doing and what it will cost. And the revenue option screening process is where we are sort of deep in the middle of it, and we've started the modeling piece of that. Similarly, we have some of the benefits and beneficiaries work underway, and that's feeding into the revenue process. The equity analysis is a layer over the top of all of these analyses, but the core piece of that will be once we have some real results from the model to analyze. And then again, there's a second phase, and I'll be providing a little overview of how the schedule looks right now. Can you go to the next slide, please, Colin? So on the communication and engagement plan, once the team got deeper into this collectively with district staff, there was a recognition that this is something that needed to coordinate across several different efforts. And it instigated a deeper dive in terms of understanding the full decision process and timeline for the new district and how the various components would have to fit together. So whereas the communications and engagement plan was initially something that might kick off immediately and be focused exclusively on this revenue project, it's expanded and it's been integrated more broadly. And there is a draft schedule in process. There is a good understanding of where this is headed, but it's not quite finalized yet. And we expect it to be finalized in early January and then moving forward. So ultimately, I think the key element of it is recognizing that engagement with stakeholders in the community is going to need to be encompassing of several issues beyond just the revenue mechanism. So we want to make sure we're getting off on the right foot, and the staff is really leading that process. Next slide, please. So again, on where we are on some of these tasks, sort of there's that first one of understanding what will the district be doing and what is it going to cost. That has gone through a few rounds of revision. It's been a useful exercise to have to think deeply and specifically about what can actually be accomplished and what that will cost. And then that feeds directly into that second task on here. What are the benefits? Who are the beneficiaries? And use that to think about some of the key drivers for identifying the right beneficiaries to align with revenue, so that we're making sure people who are benefiting are seeing a proportionate share of the cost burden. So a little bit counterintuitive might be that we have been able to make more progress on the actual revenue options. And I think those of you who are active with the revenue committee have seen that material and been able to be involved. We looked pretty far and wide at the range of options, and we are most of the way through the process of identifying the set of options for modeling. I'll get to that on some following slides in terms of more detail. But ultimately, that's where we're focused right now, is getting to that assessment of the revenue options. So the costs, the benefits, the revenue options all come together in the model to then evaluate based on criteria that have been identified and are still being, say, crystallized in terms of how they will actually be applied to model results, so that we can come up with a set of recommendations that ultimately are carried out as the final product of phase one into that phase two process that involves more wider review and engagement. Next slide, Colin. Thanks. So the screening process, just to go a little bit more detail, in November, we had a revenue committee meeting where we worked on the preliminary screening process. And this is whittling the list down to the set that we will actually be modeling, and tried to sort the available options into 3 bins. Those that we were ready to move on from and recognize there wasn't good reason to continue analyzing those. those that seem clearly good options to consider and continue to evaluate and start to build into the model. And those are the geo bond, utility fees, and there still are several types of utility fees and variation there, and activity fees, which is sort of a wide ranging type of category in terms of any place where there is a certain activity or service that's being provided that might have a fee associated. But the core of the focus right now in terms of modeling is on the geo bond and start to the utility fee piece. Now, there were some outstanding questions in terms of additional information that would be needed to be able to evaluate some of the other options, particularly in terms of property taxes and system development charges. So we have some other work ongoing to look at what the compression implications are and a few other pieces of background information for the committee. So when we reconvene in January with the Revenue Committee, we'll have more information on those outstanding categories, with the objective being that the outcome of the January meeting is that we have the settled, complete set of revenue options for evaluation in the model, basically building the model around that set of options. Next slide, please, Colin. So again, where we are right now with the project is we are proceeding with the modeling of GeoBond utility fee options. As we said, gathering some more information on those remaining options that were still in the questionable category. And then we have these other simultaneous tasks underway in terms of finalizing the description of the costs, specifically sufficient to evaluate the funding options to meet those cost obligations over the next 20 years, identifying the benefits and beneficiaries, and that ties into the cost piece because we need to know what those services are, especially some of the new services that the districts haven't focused on in the past necessarily, and how those will speak to some of the new geographies for both services and revenue generation. And then that community engagement process that we described that has become wider ranging and more coordinated with other efforts with establishment of the new district. And then finally, the equity analysis and what's happening there. There is some coordination for the community engagement piece, but also thinking about what the definitions of equity are for the purposes of evaluation of these revenue options and how that might extend out into some of the other new activities of the district. We can go to the next slide. And the last thing, just give a little overview again of where we are in terms of schedule. As we've said, we want to have a final decision at our January meeting in terms of the revenue options for modeling, having the results of that modeling effort, at least a first pass across those selected options in February and March that we start to evaluate. An important part of that is also the definition of those criteria, how we are evaluating those options, and in particular, model outputs, the model results, with the intention in March of being able to move into the equity analysis and start to think what a comprehensive revenue structure will look like and start to get some of the meat on the bones of what the full package of revenue sources will be, recognizing that it will ultimately be based on several sources of revenue, particularly based on the different categories of costs when you think about capital versus O&M and the like. And then the plan is by late spring to early summer that we will have those final results sufficient to have a completion of phase one during early summer so that we can start to work with the staff to test that full recommendation or proposal that will then ultimately be refined as we move forward during phase two. Colin, is there anything else I missed in this overview? I know we want it to be relatively quick and then open the floor if anyone has any questions.
No, I don't think there's anything else for that overview. There's some complementary work going on, some that I'll talk to about after we pause for a few minutes to take any questions, but some of the other ongoing work is through our legal team, going through and analyzing all those different revenue options. So yeah, shout out to Kelly, Sherbo, and Hong for making that happen. We're also moving forward on procuring some polling so that we can have a better understanding of community perspectives on a lot of this work. And there is, Mark mentioned the decision-making framework is in particular, it's important for the overall critical path for this revenue analysis, but it also will be really useful for you as board members to really see where those big decisions are, see where they line up, and what information you need as board members to make those decisions. And you'll be able to direct us as staff to get you adequately prepared. Yeah, so I think this would be a good point to pause and take any questions before moving into some other updates.
Good. Any questions at this point? I don't see any hands right now, so we can keep going, Colin, and I'm sure questions will come up.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Mark and his whole team at ECHO. They have been really digging in around the country looking for good examples. We're, as we have alluded to before, pretty unique. And so I want to really thank them for all their hard work advancing this work and getting us to the place where we are. So thank you. I'm going to briefly just give an update on where we are on some partnership building, in particular, how that connects into the revenue analysis work. Mark mentioned that there's the new activities, the new mandates that we have, and those are costs that have not been developed. The way that we're approaching this is to do it through a partnership building approach where we're not just getting, in the next few months, some costs to place into this model, but rather working with community-based organizations, people that are experts in the field, as well as stakeholders that we've worked with for years to develop more of a vision for what this work could be, develop programs and projects around it in a longer-term approach, but also to be able to hang some numbers for potential project work that will go into the model. And so we have been working on the environmental, natural resources, and climate front. We've been developing partnerships with the Intertwine Alliance and also having communication with Verde about outreach, convening, and collaboration with their networks. With the Intertwine Alliance, we're a little bit further ahead and actually working on developing a scope that we might be able to move forward with them. With Verde, we're going to have a meeting with some of their leadership in January, and hopefully we'll be able to give you an update to see if they have the capacity to be able to support this work. There's also the technical piece, especially on some of this environmental work, both from environmental restoration work and also incorporating green, gray infrastructure into the existing projects that we do using natural systems for some of the flood risk reduction work that we have. And so through the contract with Echo Northwest, one of their subcontractors is Wolf Water Resources. So we've been working with them to help us develop those cost estimates. So we're just moving forward with the scoping of that, but they'll be able to support that work and have numbers that are populated in the model. For the cultural history and also connected to that, the equity mandates, we have continued coordination with the Albina Vision Trust and Vanport Mosaic. They're working together, coordinating as a team on this to develop a scope and how to support this work. And so they will be, there's continued conversation, but we're really looking to them to lead the conversation, do the convening, and they'll help us craft what those actual costs that are in the model. But this is definitely a much longer term approach. And on the equity side, they are exploring their internal capacity to support us in the near and long term on equity work. And so that's something that we'll be able to provide updates once we're a little further along in that scoping process. Are there any questions on this work for the new mandate?
I do.
Yep.
I continue to try to have the Vanport Place Marking Project involved because of the extensive research, the capacity of our team to do research, and our being able to identify the equity issues, both in physical signage. We have a budget of over $170,000 that we've raised from various foundations and state agencies to do this kind of work. And so I'm a little bit disappointed that I've not been brought into the conversation. And if not me, the Historic Landmarks Commissioner, Dave Ellis, who does Willamette Resources Cultural Associates, are leading a archaeological study at the site. So they, and PSU, Department of Anthropology and Communications Department, and Steve Percy, the president of Portland State, have joined the effort in order to do historical information based on oral histories, because there are no buildings. And so we've received funding for unique, innovative, never been done before, using anthropology to tell the stories of the land, and also how it ties into the environment, natural resources, and the changes that took place when the flood happened. So if we could have a conversation at some point, because this is almost exactly what we're doing. And I kind of feel like there are other organizations that could inform the project and have the ability to do so. And maybe Corky would like to chime in and say something. I don't know. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but more than just me saying, Corky is on our board as well. So.
No, Mary Helen, that's really appreciate that comment. And to be clear, the organizations that I mentioned we're engaging with them to convene larger tables. And so it's with full recognition that we as staff and even these nonprofits and community-based organizations recognize that there is a lot of great work in the space, and it's really to bring together that information and to really co-create that vision for what the future could be, where this organization in particular could help support that work, especially work that's ongoing, and help plot that together. So I think there's a lot of room to have many more voices in this, but there is that sort of convening the table and the actual sort of facilitation process, which is more project management focused in ways.
So I'll get a hold of you off record and talk to you about that capability, because Portland State has greater capacity to do it than I'm going to say most organizations, and they're willing to do it. So I will get a hold of you, talk with you off record.
Add for the board's knowledge that it was really important to us when starting these conversations to talk to communities that have been historically marginalized and bring them to the table first. And we've gotten a lot of kudos and respect for that. And it's setting a foundation for relationships that I don't believe we would be able to build if we were starting with white-led organizations and saying to these organizations, come join us. We, the white people, have all these ideas that we've created, and now we just want your opinion. So it's been really intentional to try to create a space, especially around the cultural history issue, to invite historically marginalized communities to help be the creators of the space, to think about what that work looks like going forward. Now, it doesn't mean that we're gonna work our hardest not to exclude anybody from the conversation, given the time we have. But we're trying to balance both of those things, and we'll continue to try to do that with Indigenous and tribal communities. And it's the board's prerogative, of course, and if you direct us to do otherwise, we will do as we're told. But that has been our intent.
I guess I appreciate the approach. but, and as you've noted, it's also to create a big table where lots of folks can be there. And so appreciate Mary Helen, you connecting and making sure we're being inclusive as we can be. Shirley?
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understand the process. So right now you're developing the group of partnerships. Of course, I'm focusing on the environment and natural resources and climate resiliency bullet. So right now you're putting together partnerships or developing the partnerships on how we're going to approach that particular mandate or challenge that we have. And then after those partnerships are in place, we will then develop a work plan of some sort or goals out of the work that these different groups will be doing together. Is that correct? Is that the process? Because I guess what's going through my mind is, well, what are we going to do regarding our natural resources? What are we going to do about climate resiliency? What are we going to do about environment? But we're not there yet. This is just developing those partnerships that will allow us to begin to have those discussions. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct. There is a short-term need because of the revenue analysis and the modeling work to identify at least some placeholders on these new mandates and ensure that they're incorporated into the modeling work. And so that the partnership development is, I guess, at two speeds. There's that sort of short work, which is more kind of round numbers, level of magnitude estimates, but being really intentional in not just trying to rush and get a whole bunch of numbers because we need to plug them into a model, but instead really developing long-term relationships with these community-based organizations that will continue to help us actually develop what the programs are and how we'll implement the programs and individual projects in the years to come.
I'll just add, the reason I'm asking this is, of course, Bob Salinger multiple times, this is really important to him. And what I haven't heard yet is, well, what is it we need and want to do to be able to support the environment? And so I just want to be clear that I was understanding this right. So thank you for the helping me understand this.
Thanks, Corky. I maybe should have called you earlier if you're gonna or add on to Mary Helen, but go ahead.
Yeah, I do want to encourage staff to take a look at Vanport Place Marking project regarding the history. Obviously, this wouldn't be regarding environment and natural resources and not especially equity, but in terms of the history, with the clear exception of me, she's put together an extraordinary board of directors there. You might want to take a look at that. It's really hard to beat. And she's been pretty successful with grants, primarily because the project has just taken a very objective, this is what happened approach, not trying to elaborate or proselytize or editorialize anything, just saying this is what's happened and we want to record that. That's pretty valuable. So I do encourage staff to take a good look at that, an objective look at that, and start out looking at the board that's been put together there. Like I said, take me out of the equation because I have no standing, but there's some folks there that really do, and it's the progress has been extraordinary.
Okay.
Evan, you've been close to the conversation. Did you want to add anything in response to Councillor Craddock's question? Just checking.
The only thing that I guess I was sort of furiously texting to Colin was that part of what's driving a lot of the conversations that we've been having is this interest in pushing money out into the community, really taking sort of a metro type approach, as we've seen with some of your most recent bond measures, where rather than creating a bunch of new government infrastructure, we have an opportunity to identify some goals and put some money out into the community. And so from the environmental standpoint, the cultural history standpoint, we're sort of looking at how can we continue to push that approach. I don't feel like I can fairly speak to the issues, but I see that Carrie Sandeman is on the line, and I'm sure Carrie could provide more information about the various issues that are being discussed and has had in-depth conversations with Bob and others. So Carrie, would you like to add anything?
I guess I'd like to point out that I think about it as we have essentially some planning work to do around what are the activities of the new district and what are the goals, what are these new programs trying to accomplish, and in a parallel track, what's that going to cost? And we don't want to conflate these too much, but they do, of course, relate to each other. And I think when we're driven by the revenue development deadlines, we want to make sure that we are close enough, that we're right enough, and we're understanding enough about the activities to make some good estimates that drive a sustainable and well-founded revenue structure. But we also don't want to, we want to make those sort of strategic and programmatic decisions deliberately as well. And Colin talked about sort of also the idea that this is a partnership building venture that will continue for quite a while. So we've been thinking about making those strategic and programmatic decisions in a somewhat parallel path, but probably a little slower, so that we can do it at the pace of trust, and so that we can do it in collaboration with our partners and not necessarily entirely driven by the milestones that we need to make for the revenue development process. But we are thinking a lot about what are those strategic products, what are the ways in which we might want to package up the options for the board to consider around the activities, the strategies that the new program areas will be delivering.
Sure. Oh, excuse me. Mary Helen?
I just have one question. It's overall structure of how we're addressing these new mandates and because it sounds like there's questions about the environmental one and the cultural and equity one. Obviously, I brought it up because it's near and dear to my heart. But who or how was it decided that these might be, the best opportunities for the board to spend their money on exploring these mandates? And how is that getting funded? Or is that anything we need to pay attention to, or does Penn 2 need to pay, the different drainage districts? I guess that's my question. I did print out the contracts. I didn't see it in that, but I guess I'm just curious, because if I'm a board member and then I'm complaining and I represent a project, I'll be totally honest, that sounds fish. I would even say that, but then as a board member, I would want to know how these agencies were selected, and was there a vetting process of how they were?
So I can try and answer your question. First of all, no one's been selected yet. And so we're in the process of trying to hire conveners around these topics. And we wanted them to be community driven. And in the topic of cultural history, we really wanted to put an emphasis on the Black community, because they were the ones most deeply impacted. So we reached out to several organizations to gauge their willingness and their capacity to help us convene a table to begin the conversation. And so that's where we're at, both with the Cultural History and Equity, and we're looking at Vanport Mosaic and the Albina Vision Trust as our conveners. And again, we've made it clear to them that we want to fund them to be a convener and to include a broad range of stakeholders in the conversation, with the objective of developing some initial programmatic and funding recommendations for you in time to incorporate them into the revenue work. And then those will obviously need to be fleshed out. All of this work needs to be paid for by the urban district, and it is the purview of the urban board because they are urban district mandates, not legacy district mandates. So that's the basic idea. I hope I answered your question. And it has been at my direction that we've engaged these particular groups after doing pretty significant outreach through Portland State to the Oregon Historical Society and others, and not getting the answers that we really needed and not establishing that community-driven co-creation aspect of particularly the cultural history piece, which feels really important to me.
Okay, thank you. I mean, there's, again, I'll talk to you at another time. I mean, there's Chet Orloff as an advisor to us. He,
so there's
Carl
a role
Abbott, all of those people.
There's a role for all of them, but
yeah.
Again, we really wanted to start off with folks actually in the Black community, and that we really wanted to talk with them, and then we can figure out how to flesh the rest of it out. But we felt like it was their story to tell. I'm going to be really candid with you. That was,
Okay.
and I learned that at Metro. So you can change that if you'd like, and I'm open to your direction. I truly am.
No, that's fine. But just to counter that, you'd have a lot of trouble in the Native American community by saying it just affected the Black people.
Thank you. I don't mean to leave out, we are talking to Kwitfik and Nea and others as well in the tribal community. And we've also attempted to reach out to the Japanese American community. And again, those are the people that we're asking whoever we engage as our convener to make sure that they're involved. And we felt like it would have more credibility, honestly, if it came from a community-driven organization and not our staff. We may be mistaken in that assumption. I've been the one driving that based on what I learned at Metro.
Okay, I think the point here that I'm getting is that however this convening occurs, it needs to be all inclusive. It needs to be, reach out to all these communities, and it needs to be done in a time frame that gets some input into the revenue structure, because these are the new mandates for the district in the statute, and it's the reason for this outreach. And I appreciate that. I appreciate it can be done a lot of different ways. And I also appreciate that the staff is trying to very much kind of turn the standard model on its head, in that we often do this outreach from the staff perspective and trying to get community-based organizations that are most affected to be the ones who convene and be the outreach mechanism is new ground for many of us. And so I appreciate that. And I would encourage any board member that has questions to give Jim or Evan a call and talk through the thinking. Corky, you put your hand up again, and Commissioner Craddock, I don't know if you have left your hand up or wanted to comment again. Corky, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I was disturbed. I'm glad you guys caught that. I was disturbed when I heard that we had to place the Black community in this role because they're the ones that have been disadvantaged. There's a lot of folks who have been disadvantaged. And so please, let's make very, very clear note of that. And then my caution here is, along what Mike was saying, is that I think this is a great idea to put disadvantaged communities in the role of being conveners. But what I'm hearing you say is this is a role of being a convener. And I want to make sure that as you reach out to these organizations, that you on staff are very, very clear that they need to be experienced and competent in convening. If not, then there's a different role for them. And that may very well be the case. But what I hear is they need to convene. And I do want to make sure that that is that's prioritized, that skill is prioritized. Thanks.
James.
Great, thank you, Mike. I just want to add one comment that I hope is helpful and not overly obvious. I've been involved with the drainage districts through Penn 1 for almost 6 years now. And, when I look at this first bullet, environment, natural resources, and climate resilience, I really can see how in multiple conversations with Carrie Sandeman on staff, with Brian Eberhardt, who works closely with the PBEM, Multnomah County and City of Portland on disaster related, resilience related issues. I think we're really well served and well positioned by the staff here. And I would want other board members to know, or I would want to share my perspective with the other board members, that we've got really good experienced people on this. And then I want to commend staff and commend Jim for trying to lead with equity, because many of us in the public agencies are involved in these conversations every day, and goals, projects, and activities often have timelines associated with them, and equity gets sidelined if we don't lead with it. So, you know, I know this is new ground for everyone, but I just want to say that my comfort level is very high given the staff we have and the approach we're taking. And I look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I am going to move us. We're getting close to time on this issue. So I know there's one more piece, the capital needs overview. And Evan, we have a memo from you in the packet. Are you on this?
I am, and I am on this particular issue because we wanted to provide you with an update, but we didn't want to go too deep. And I have been working on a number of the more kind of urgent capital projects for several years now. And we wanted to, for some of you, I'm looking at Tanny, you are going to know some of these projects inside and out because we've been talking about them for years. But for some of you, these are relatively new. So we wanted to kind of get y'all grounded in some of the work that we're going to be doing, or some of the projects that we're looking to fund and how much they're going to cost, and start to bring some of the capital projects to the forefront with this particular board. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I have 3 showing right now, so hopefully I am not showing you your faces.
While you're getting your screen ready, this is the fun part, you guys. This is where we actually are investing in the system and making it better. And so I think it's really great to have Evan give you the talk, because this is what you need to be talking about to your friends and your neighbors and your colleagues, because this is the cool part. This is why we're here. So just a little bit of rah-rah, because this is really exciting stuff. We're going to make a much better system. So with that, sorry, Evan, couldn't resist.
No, thank you, Jim. It's always good to have the rah-rah up front. Are you all seeing a beautiful picture of a levee and river? And awesome. All right. So just to frame this out a little bit, I'm going to do a real quick reminder about what it is we're responsible for and we take care of. Currently, the system is 27 miles of levees that run basically from North Portland all the way to the Sandy River. We also have 12 pump stations and 45 miles of slough, culverts, ditches, kind of an abundance of drainage ways that we use to move water basically out from behind the levees. And this map here demonstrates a set of projects that we are calling urgent flood safety needs. We're going to talk through kind of a number of capital projects over the next 6 months as we develop our revenue model and get to that consultant recommendation. These are the projects that we are sort of moving to the top for several reasons. One is that they're associated with levee accreditation through FEMA, which is really the issue that brought the Levee Ready Columbia partnership together to begin with. And led us to seek a partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers, where they did a study and found additional vulnerabilities in the system. So the green lines that you're seeing on this map and the little dots, little raindrops, are the projects that we're going to be talking through, which are associated with accreditation and with the Army Corps of Engineers study. There's a bunch of projects that we're going to be talking about though. So as drainage districts and through the Levee Ready Columbia partnership, we have really focused on flood safety because that was the reason we all came together. It's really, and there's a lot of implications if we are not able to recertify the levee system. But as we continue to work over the next 6 months and beyond, we have additional other needs. You know, the drainage districts each have their own 5-year capital improvement plans, which will need to be incorporated into the urban flood safety water quality districts plans. We've already talked a little bit today around the kind of environmental mandates of this district and thinking about climate adaptation and restoration, the watershed enhancement plan that's required in the legislation, but also sort of this, what we're kind of calling greening of our existing operations and CIPs. And then there may be cultural history and equity related investments as well on the capital front, which is something that we'll continue to flesh out as we go through this process. And I'm a little bummed that Bob isn't here because this slide was for him, because the rest of my conversation is going to focus predominantly on the flood safety column of projects, which is where we've done the majority of the work. Corky, you have your hand up. Is that a new or an old? Okay, well, under the flood safety umbrella, we have identified through the levee recertification projects and the Army Corps' recommended projects about $160 million of investment needed. Eric, is that a new question?
Yeah. So why don't you ground this first? So the last time we spoke about the
Am I the only one that's not
Yeah. Eric, your audio is breaking up a little bit.
Right. There's another.
So why don't you let me describe these costs a little bit more, and then I'll take some questions, because I think I'm going to break it down a little bit. So I'm
right, with a built-in computer monitor. Sometimes that works better than Bluetooth.
Yeah,
Can you hear
that's
me now?
It's better.
All right. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers estimated that their project was $157.7 million.
That was
okay, and this did not include the recertification projects. Then they went through a period where they did some value engineering. Is the USACE's new estimate for the levee project down by $30 million?
It is. It's about 130 million total.
And now I'm not hearing you.
We can hear her.
Okay, good.
Oh, so
I think maybe you have to unplug all the way. I'm going to keep talking through these costs, because yes, the original estimation from January of 2020 has dropped as they've refined the project. So
it truly has gone down by $30 million?
Yeah.
And have they given you, at some point, I'd like to see the detail to that.
Yeah, and their full report is up on their website if you'd like to take a look at it. They're pretty detailed in the analysis in that report, and you can always chat with staff about what else. But they dropped out, they both dropped out some stuff, and they refined footprints to a pretty large extent based on feedback. And so there was a considerable cost saving due to that. So I'm gonna keep us moving.
do that.
The part that I wanted to focus on with this group is really the amount that we have left to fund. Because if we go through the core, assuming that we're able to get authorized through Congress and secure funding for the Corps, they're basically bringing a $2 for every $1 that we put in for their project. And so where that kind of leaves us at a global scale is if we can bring in 65% through the federal government for their project, then we'll be left with about 75 million at the local level that we need to fund for flood safety, sort of urgent needs associated with the levy accreditation process and with the vulnerabilities that the Corps identified. So we have a lot of different tools that we're working on putting in place to fund these various needs for you and the community. Just, I think last month or the month before, Brian Eberhardt was here talking to you all about the natural hazard mitigation plans and FEMA funding. And we're pursuing that avenue so that we can access a lot of FEMA money that is available right now through several grant programs. We also have been working over the last 5-6 years at the state level to implement multiple pots of funding specifically for levees and embankments and flood walls and those types of improvements. And so for this biennium, we've been able to get $15 million appropriated with both planning and construction grants. We'll continue, assuming that you all want to continue that direction, we'll continue to go to Salem and advocate for that pot to be replenished. And over time, other pots of funding to be created so that we can continue to bring the state into this effort in a more meaningful way. And then as these conversations have continued, it was really the Levee Ready Columbia partnership and a number of your entities at that table that identified this sort of other local need for capital funding. And at least right now, you heard it from Mark Buckley earlier on in the presentation, we are assuming there is going to be a need to issue general obligation bonds with voter approval. And so we're moving on all of these different tracks to make sure that we're bringing in funding basically every way we could possibly find it to advance these projects that are so, important to our system. I'm not going to go through this timeline in detail, but we will send it out. A couple months ago, Jim brought you sort of his 3-year vision for how we get all of this done. And as we've continued this work, we've started to really flesh out what that timeline would look like and are starting to see a clear pathway to a 2023 May 2023 ballot. Assumes we get some legislative fixes in the ORS 550 so that the initial board, you all, can refer a bond measure, but we are, currently as a staff doing the due diligence to support that effort by May of 2023. There's sort of a number of different elements to making that a reality, including both setting up that operational revenue structure that Colin and Mark were talking about, getting our Go Bond package developed so that we can refer it and put it on the ballot. There's a board component of this and the transition to that permanent elected and appointed board that comes after this first board. And at least for right now, the thinking is that we could have both on the ballot at the same time. So a general obligation bond in May of 2023, along with the election of the first permanent board members at the same time, which would then allow, hopefully allow for the this board, or I guess no, it would be the permanent board. So the next iteration of you all to call for the dissolution of the drainage districts, assuming that we'd already brought in money, we'd started collecting the operational revenue. So it's a lot to do in a 2-year, basically a 2-year window, but we're starting to really see the clear pathway to get there. I'm going to stop there before I dig into some of these, walk through some of the big projects, because I imagine there's questions.
Shirley has a question.
I guess I see this as good news. So if I understood you correctly, it looks like the GEO bond might be around 75 million in there somewhere. Maybe, so I guess that's a lot less than what I had assumed. And do we know how many people live in this district? I assume it's quite a few. And I'm just more curious, I'm probably out ahead of you, but how much that might be per household. I would assume it's going to be maybe less than what I had intended or had assumed. So I hope so. I know I'm out there in front of you and you probably haven't gotten there, but I'm more curious. I take this as really good news.
Yeah, I think it's good news. I think Jim probably thinks it's really good news considering he put the challenge out to us. But
You can
yeah,
always ask for more, Councillor Craddock, but
I would not go out and start saying we're only looking to raise $75 million because that doesn't include all the flood safety projects that have been identified through the drainage district CIPs. It also doesn't include any of our new mandates at all. And so, you know, there's obviously a lot of discussion that needs to happen around how much funding is going to be put towards those new areas. But yes, and then the other thing I can say is that when Levee Ready Columbia was modeling a GeoBond effort, they modeled approximately $50 million in capital needs. And it looked like it was going to cost about $12 a year, between 11 and $12 a year for sort of the average $350,000 home owner. Now, home prices have changed a lot since that modeling was done, and the world is different. But you know, that was certainly, we were looking around $12 a month or a year ballpark.
Congratulations, a lot of work.
Thank you.
Okay, Evan, what was the next thing you wanted to go into?
So I'm going to just do a quick highlight of a couple of projects rather than kind of walk through all of these. Some of the big picture projects that we're looking at getting done through this pot of funding. One of the things that you all will have heard a lot about is the railroad embankment that runs along the western end of the system. The Corps has, after doing a lot of research and analysis and lots of attempted conversations with the railroads, both at the drainage district level, the regional level, the state level, and with the Corps is recommending that we build a new levee along the inside of the railroad embankment. That is probably one of the largest projects that's recommended here. It's both a recertification project to maintain accreditation, and it is a core recommendation to sort of make the system more resilient. So that is one of the biggest projects. They also have a number of pump station improvements that they're recommending throughout the district to really create backup power for us and give us a connection so we can bring in generators and have backup power should the grid go down. We also, another sort of recertification project that we're looking at dealing with both with the Corps is under I-5. There's essentially a flood wall that doesn't connect to the levee properly. And so that's one piece that we're looking to improve. That's being coordinated alongside the ODOT and WashDOT Interstate Bridge project. And so those conversations are ongoing. In Penn 2, the sort of big improvement in Penn 2 that's being discussed is the levee raise along the river, which corresponds roughly with Marine Drive and then Bridgeton Road. There was a lot of discussion around the tentatively selected plan specifically related to this project, because initially the Corps was recommending between a 3 and 4 foot flood wall go down Bridgeton Road, which the community was not happy about. And it took, after a lot of discussion and walking the street with the Corps and talking to the community, they were able to sort of refine that option and come back with between a 1 and 2 foot road raise. So it's still an extensive project, but it will do a lot to mitigate what they're seeing as a real risk for overtopping. So where the waters come over the top of the levee in Pen 1 and Pen 2. The other big improvement that sort of goes between Pen 1 and Pen 2 is there's this old drainage canal that exists that is really great turtle habitat. There's all sorts of great stuff happening there. And so it's a really, it's a beloved and protected part of our system. And there's also a need to deal with the slope basically within that drainage canal. Only on the eastern side, which you can kind of see from this graphic, protects the airport, provides really important protection for major public infrastructure. So that is one of the other big projects. It's a certification project, so we'll have to do it in order to meet FEMA standards, and the Corps identified it. Right now, what they're recommending is that we widen only on the landward side, which won't disrupt the turtles that live there and nest there, and we add a gravel toe. There's lots of other conversation that we'll need to have around this particular project. There's recreational interests, there's all sorts of interests, but this is the sort of initial recommendation. As you get further down that drainage canal, our office is sort of located where that water drop is, and that is where Pump Station 1 is located. There's another project down there that is a recertification project that it's also tow and sort of seepage issues. So we have some pretty cool ideas for that one to add some environmental benefits onto that project. It's definitely something that the Levee Ready Columbia team is going to have to talk about further. The board is going to have to discuss, but that is an opportunity where we could both we've identified the ability to both shore up the infrastructure need and potentially add environmental benefits onto that project. I know that we're running late, so I want to jump us over to Sandy and just point out there's a couple of key projects out in Sandy. One is to elevate and replace the SDIC pump station, which was built at a very different time for a very different Troutdale that had significantly less there. And so the recommendation here adds capacity, it elevates the pump station to a higher level, and will give us the redundancy of being able to plug a generator into that pump station. We also are looking at either decommissioning or replacing, for those of you who drive down 223rd, as you're headed south, if you look over to the left, there's kind of this old, ugly wooden structure. Nobody knows what it's for. It's connected to a gate valve, which basically is supposed to open or close two dual pipes that run through the cross levee there. And those pipes are currently stuck open. They have been open for a while, and there's no way for our team to access that structure to open and close those valves. So we're looking at either decommissioning or replacing that. That's one of our certification projects that isn't funded or isn't included in the Corps' package, partly because they saw this sort of as a long-term operational issue. And so there's additional work that needs to be done there to identify what the best option is going forward. But that project is close to this community over here in Fairview, at Fairview Lake and Blue Lake right there, and will be something that will get a little bit of attention as we continue to move it forward. I think the other things to be aware of is the Corps identified levee fragility in Sandy that we were not previously aware of. And so they're looking at raising essentially about half of the riverward levee, where there's a 4-foot low spot right here, which is pretty significant. And then also looking at raising by, I think, about 1 foot. And Mark is not here to nod his head for me, but also raising this levy. So obviously there's a lot more that we could talk about, but we wanted to sort of highlight, give you a little bit of flavor of the types of projects that we're looking at, and prepare you for more fun conversations about paying for these capital projects in the near future.
You can sort of see the beginnings of some of the materials we're going to need to produce to explain what the investments are going to accomplish to the public. So thanks, Evan, for the high level overview. But I do think this is really important for you all to sort of absorb, because these are the projects that we're going to need to really explain to the voters that we're going to ask to support us. So.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a couple of other things in the packet about the Revenue Committee and also about the Levee Ready Columbia transition. And I don't know which one of those you want to talk about first, or, and I don't know, Colin or.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, I will. Let's maybe do the Levee Ready Columbia one first, and then the Revenue Analysis Committee, mostly because I just reshuffled slides.
Okay.
I'm just going to share my screen again. So there are 2 proposals that were included in your packet. They're both for discussion and to get some direction from the board on how you'd like to proceed, just have a conversation about. So the first one is about the Levee Ready Columbia transition. And so that proposal is to basically make this committee, or make this board, the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Board, the representatives for the Levee Ready Columbia IGA. And I'll talk a little bit more about what the current mechanics are and what the proposal and reasons to make that change. But I wanted to begin with just a very quick overview of what Levee Ready Columbia is. I think almost all of you have been participating in Levee Ready Columbia in one way or another. Only a few people haven't been deeply involved, so I won't spend too much time. But LRC is a partnership that goes back to 2013, which was really created because of shared responsibility for recertification and technical work of the levees. And so that blossomed into more than 20 organizations committed to not only modernizing the levee system, but also modernizing the way that we govern that levee system. And so it directly led to the creation of this urban board. There's a number of other things that were done. The first comprehensive evaluation of the levee system that had ever been done in about 100 years. Also the lobbying for the first the feasibility study, but what is now called the Portland Metro Levee System Study, and all the staff support of that work from the non-federal sponsor has all come through Levee Ready Columbia. Also in Salem, beyond the creation of the urban board, we've also been working with the legislature to really understand flood risk statewide, and that has led to the creation of the levee subaccount of the Infrastructure Finance Authority as a loan program, and subsequently as a grant program. So we've been amplifying the message and building partnerships statewide, but really focused on the Columbia Corridor and the flood risks that we face here. So there's a lot of other work that the group has done, but currently where the transition, the genesis for the transition and timing is the group has completed the scoping of projects that are needed for recertification. A lot of those are accomplished through the PMLS, the Army Corps of Engineers work, but there remain some projects that are not included, but we have to do. There is an assumption that those projects will be the projects of this new board. Hopefully they'll be included however the capital projects are funded, but we assume those projects will be part of the general obligation bond to be able to sort of do a full modernization, get those to modern levee standards, as well as be able to recertify and maintain accreditation, which is really important for the cities and particularly the landowners for flood insurance. And so where we have brought those projects is not just on flood control, but also on multi-benefit opportunities. By multi-benefit, we're really looking at if there are associated environmental projects and recreational projects that can be scoped in at the same time. So we've completed those scopes, but now we want to make sure that all of this work is fully connected to the mandates of the new district. And ultimately, we have a number of alternatives. We need those alternatives to be selected, and the decision-making body, we assume, is the urban board. And so we'll continue through the Levee Ready Columbia process. We have an IGA with the partners. That's a 2019 to 2024 IGA. At the end of that the fiscal year 24, we hope to have advanced in the PMLS project. We hope to have selected projects that will be ready for construction based on capital funding, and we hope to have those into the design process. So there's a number of other legislative and communication pieces that need to be coordinated as well. One second. So why this proposal? And so the purpose of the proposed transition is to create one streamlined process. And going into the 2019 legislative session, it was always the expressed intention that we have all these sort of confederated efforts that we're moving forward, and they're all very necessary, but ultimately we want to land all of them, the existing drainage district, Levee Ready Columbia, all of the other great work that our different partner agencies have been doing. We want to land those all within the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District. And I think there's many reasons why different entities want that. Some people want to stop being asked for money to pay for all this. Some people just want one single entity that has that ultimate responsibility. And that's our goal. And so, this proposal is one piece of that. There's a lot more going on, but we hope to connect one more piece of those. And so we'll also be able to advance the decision-making and make that more clear. And I think one thing I didn't mention in that is that there would be fewer meetings. We currently need to have Levee Ready Columbia meet separately. They're a ORS 550 non-entity, but that means that they have to follow all state public meeting processes, and we need to, it's an additional, right now there are 6, really 7 districts that the staff manage, and looking to combine those makes a lot of sense. So fewer meetings is good from, I think, everyone's perspective. So what steps would be needed? So really what I'm proposing to this board is that each one of you would be designated by your entities to be the representatives for Levee Ready Columbia. The way that the IGA is set up is that the parties of the IGA, I have a matrix that's a little bit further down, but each party to the IGA has a representative, similar to how many of you were designated to be on this board. To make this work, you would all need to be designated as Levee Ready Columbia representatives by your entities. Also, to make this work, we do have a scope of work that we need to complete and move forward for the IGA to be successful. And so we would need to continue having those financial contributions through the IGA. And we would need to keep on making efforts to continue to synchronize those different pieces, and especially make progress on those recertification projects so that we can demonstrate to FEMA that, yes, while there are not these projects that are in the Army Corps' work, that we have a path to get them done. And based on this same conversation with the Levee Ready Columbia group, I think there was a great request to sort of give some of the pros and cons, and I think there's more than just this. And I think I've gone over the pros, but the cons are noted during that LRC IGA board meeting, the institutional knowledge, some people that have been at that table since 2013 or 2015, making sure that those connections remain. If there is someone who has not been part of that, that is on this board, on your board, we want to make sure that all the folks that have been working on the LRC effort and been really thinking about it and advocating for its success remain connected to the work. And then there is clunkiness. And I think that clunkiness in meeting mechanics is that we don't intend to amend the IGA. And that means that we would need to, your board, when you would be discussing Levee Ready Columbia work, it would need to be at the end of the agenda, and it would need to be a separate meeting that is separately noticed, and you would need to go out of session of this board and move into session. Yeah, switch hats. So it could be part of an associated agenda, but it would need to be separately noticed in a separate meeting, call yourself into order. And so we have to be cognizant of that, and it is a little bit clunky. And I'm sure there's other cons, and I think it would be great for anyone who has those to bring those up. So I can show you a matrix of who the current reps are, but I think it might just be good. Wanted to have conversation with this board, brought it up to the LRC IGA board last Tuesday, and there was general positive feelings about it, but there's also some reservations and requests to have additional conversations, especially with the existing drainage district boards. And so we'll be bringing that back for conversation next month to the LRC IGA. Both entities will need resolutions. And so we would be bringing back a resolution to make this transition to your board and to the LRC board. So with that, I will stop talking and open it up for anyone that was on the LRC meeting that would like to share any other details or general conversation.
Any thoughts from folks who were at the meeting last week?
Just a suggestion, Colin. One of the things you want to do is have, if I understand this correctly, is to have the LRC reps be the same as the UFS reps. That can, if I understand correctly, that can happen right now, regardless of anything else. So why don't you go ahead and start that rolling, to help move things along by sending us that information. For example, MCDD, if you could send us and say, look, this is what we want you, we want MCDD to appoint X person as the LRC rep, and they can go ahead and start that process now. I know this was an issue for Metro, so presumably Councilor Craddock would be the LRC rep, and it's going to take them some time to do that. So if you could send us that information to get that rolling, that would be really helpful.
I can definitely do that. And so, yeah, we had basically a one-pager that designates the individual, and so I think we still want to have some kind of formal resolution, but at any time, any of these entities can nominate a different person to be the representative. So we can get moving on that, absolutely.
Other comments, questions? Canny?
So we're looking at basically taking these projects and running them through on the urban flood safety mandates, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so that would mean they would be fully funded by the GO bond, most likely.
That's the expectation, yes.
Okay. So then we can take them off the CIPs, the drainage districts, most likely.
Yeah, currently, they are not, where they show up on the CIPs of the drainage districts is for staff coordination, in particular our engineering team supporting the work that the LRC team has been doing. And so the PMLS projects still are on the CIPs for the drainage districts, but these non-PMLF certification projects to show up for staff time.
Any other questions? Colin, I want you to be clear with us about what your expectation is today and then what you want to do going forward. But first, Shirley's got a question.
Thank you. Is there a particular timeline to this? I was looking at the document you sent us. I don't see a specific timeline that's mentioned.
The timeline for any decision-making is late spring or the summer. So to get moving on that earlier would be no problem. But there's, it's not, it doesn't need to be done right now, but it would be great if this is the direction that the board would like to take. It would be great to get it done this spring.
Councillor Craddock, just to punctuate it, what we're hoping is to be able to select design alternatives from the range of alternatives that have been put together now so that we can move those into the construction design process.
But for this transition, you'd be looking to bring resolutions both to the LRC IGA board and one to this board next month. And you'd be hoping, assuming those passed, you'd be working with all of the member jurisdictions for the IGA board to make sure that the representative for the LRC board and the Urban Flood Safety Board are the same person. Have I got that right?
Correct.
That's correct. And so I would like to get the, if there's at least thumbs up from this board, if you'd like to move forward in that direction, that will help us bring the resolution. You always have, when the resolution is up for consideration, it can go any way the board takes it, but we would like to have your direction to develop the resolution.
Well, Eric's got his thumb up, but Tanny, do you have another question?
No, I was just going to say, and I don't know if this is the position that anybody else is in, but I need to go back to the Sandy board and float this with them before I'm thumbing anything.
Okay.
That makes sense. I think, again, as Corky pointed out, MCDD would need to do that too, to appoint Corky in place of me. And Metro would need to have a conversation about appointing Councillor Craddock instead of Annalise, and the City of Troutdale, although, well, I guess Nolan, City of Fairview, Nolan's retiring. So, but yeah, each jurisdiction needs to get that done. So it might be a February timeframe for the two district boards to take care of that, the LRC and the Urban.
To clarify, Jim, they may want to appoint you instead of me, so.
I will resist that, but.
That would present all kinds of wonderful complications.
Yes, it's already a little odd.
I'm going to take it, unless there's objection, that Colin has our direction to at least prepare the resolutions and begin the processes, realizing that some of you for sure are going to need to go back to boards and talk through that changing in appointments and what you all think of that. Does that make sense? Eric's got a thumb up. I'm not hearing any objections. So Colin, you can begin to prepare.
All right, thank you.
And I don't have the other, do you want to talk about the other charter issue for the Revenue Committee?
My report is very brief and not time sensitive. So I think it'd be good to at least introduce this idea and get a initial reaction from folks.
Okay, go for it.
All right, solstice is tomorrow, so seasonal change, lots of transition. So the proposal here is for the dissolution of the Revenue Analysis and Development Subcommittee, but it would be replaced, and all the work of the committee would be replaced with your whole board. And there's a few reasons why this is being proposed. Currently, 11 out of 15 of the board members are on the Revenue Analysis Committee. So that's fully 73% of the board, a little over 73%. But how the committee structure works is that the committee can only make a recommendation and that needs to be brought to the full board for any kind of decisions. And so this proposal would allow for the whole board to be convened as a special meeting of the board to consider the revenue analysis work. And that's provided under your bylaws in section 9. And then we would also be able to make decisions within the meeting and not have to have the sort of two-step that's built in, and also be able to have more flexibility in when meetings are scheduled. So we'd be able to use part of this current meeting, your standing board meeting monthly, if there is any type of decisions or discussion that needed to be moved forward. So it allows a little bit more of that flexibility. There are obviously some cons to this, especially for folks that aren't currently in that committee. So that would be an additional workload for those members. And then we also would need to provide adequate time in between those different meetings if we're moving things forward for any kind of discussion. There's more people involved. There's just sort of more process that happens. And so making sure that the meetings are well managed will be of utmost importance. That's a very quick proposal. And talking to our legal team, the best way to do this would basically be for just a dissolution of that committee. And so your board would make that recommendation, and we can bring that to you next month or whenever.
Thoughts or questions? Or Jim, did you want to add anything to that?
Only that I just watched the revenue subcommittee and the conversation, and this feels like it may be a way for us to save a little bit of time and resource from your staff, but this is not an essential thing. It just, as we were talking about it as staff, felt like it might be a better way to make sure we engage the full board and not have to repeat some of the conversations that are going on in the revenue committee. So again, we're looking for every way we can to save time and money on our administrative costs. So that's what's driving this.
Any thoughts? Questions?
He's got a hand up.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. Corky?
Yeah, I don't really have any objection to it, but it does worry me a little bit because this isn't something that we want to be rushing. And I kind of feel like it probably would get a little bit rushed if it just moves to a board meeting. Maybe we set aside a specific board meeting to only talk about revenue issues. That might alleviate some of that concern, or maybe I'm just being overly concerned. But I worry that as part of the board meeting, we're going to be rushing through that and not being able to have the less formal conversation that we can have in a committee meeting.
Now, that's a really great point, Corky. And so the proposal is to continue having those meetings, and they would be a special meeting of this board, and that would be monthly or ad hoc as they're needed, which gives that sort of informal, more room to actually have conversations. But we would still be able to use agenda items in this meeting to advance the work of the revenue analysis as needed.
I apologize. I misunderstood then. I think that makes sense. Sure.
Eric?
The good clarification. That was my question as well. I can't think of an activity of the board that's more important than going through this revenue model. And so I encourage everybody to get fully up to speed on what the options are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my vision of the future was having to repeat all that discussion for 2 or 3 board members, and that felt painful to me. But again, not everybody's going to be able to attend every revenue committee, and so it's sort of a maybe best of bad choices. I don't know.
Well, it does seem like an opportunity, to the degree people are interested, to not have to repeat entire conversations very often anyway. So,
but for people who miss, we don't want to leave them out anyway. So there may be some of that required.
Of course, yeah. There's no guarantee that all 11 would be at every subcommittee meeting either. So
Why don't we let you think about that and we can talk about it next month? I don't know that, I don't want to force a decision here, and candidly, your perspectives on it will be valuable to us because we're seeing it from the administrative perspective, and we want to make sure you all have a chance to ponder it and how it helps you with or hurts you with your stakeholders and others that you speak for. So.
well, that makes sense. Everybody kind of noodle on it. If you have questions, give staff a call. And if you want to take it back home and talk with others about it, that makes sense too. And we can bring it back next month and talk it over again.
So there really are two items in my report that I think are relevant and maybe a tiny bit juicy. So
well, we can't not have that. So
the first one, I want to just introduce Evan again to talk about polling. And Evan, do you want to just give a highlight about what's happening on the polling end? You're muted, sorry.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so we have just completed an RFP process to select a pollster to help with our initial poll. We had a couple of bids and ultimately ended up selecting FM3 Group. They are beloved in the area and used by a number of other entities here. They have a lot of experience in ballot measures in the area and have also done a great deal of flood safety related work around the country. So we're pretty excited about that. Process is always really important when developing polling instruments. Their recommendation has been to start with some focus groups and then do a poll so that we can kind of build over time. So we will be working with them over the next few weeks to flesh that out a little bit more and come back to you in January to talk about what this board's role is and how you'd like to be involved as we work towards getting our first poll out the door.
So I think it's really going to be helpful to us to have that sort of baseline information about how regular people think. And we will be talking to you about maybe who gets to come to these focus groups and what kind of people you want to have there, and then what kind of sampling you want to do, and whether there are particular communities that you want to oversample or convene in focus groups. Again, we have a limit on our ability to spend money because of our procurement rules, which are really appropriate. So we won't be able to do everything in this initial work, but I do think it'll really be informative to all of us in terms of our position with the voters. The other thing that I wanted to talk with you about is board recruitment. I'm going to try and share my screen here if I can. Nope. Emily, do you want to share that list, or do you want to give me the ability? And so essentially we have a list of people that have been recommended to potentially be named by you all. Thank you, on your board. And what we have struggled with a little bit is getting the outreach done to those folks. So I'm hoping you all can see my screen. This may not be a complete list, but this is the list that we believe of people, of organizations and people that have been recommended. So in order to get these folks on the board, I guess what I'm suggesting is that you all need to either make assignments for some of you to call these folks and see if they're interested, or my alternative recommendation would be that you authorize staff to make some phone calls and connect them up with board members. But I think it's important that we actually fill these positions. And I'm interested in making sure that we do that in a way that is appropriate and ethical and ensures that the board has full say over who ends up on there. But I also am sensing that perhaps a little boost from your loyal staff and reaching out to some of these people might be beneficial. So I'm going to stop there, and we can either get volunteers who want to call these folks, or we could do it jointly, or you can authorize staff to do some work to see if they're interested and get some appointments set up between them and members of the board to try and close the deal.
What are the vacant positions?
We have two not-for-profit positions. One needs to be focused on environmental justice, and the other needs to just have an interest in the floodplain. And they don't need, neither of them need to necessarily be located in the floodplain itself, per our legal interpretation.
So Jim, maybe to short circuit this a bit, I would suggest that the staff reach out just to gauge interest, and folks are interested in the opportunity. And then I would ask all board members sometime this week if you could contact Jim or Emily and let them know if any of these people or more than one that you have a relationship with and would be interested in discussing board participation. I, for one, am happy to be involved with Laura John. We work together a lot at the city, and I know, excuse me, I know others have relationships with many of these folks. Does that make sense?
Well, since my name's on a number of those, they were who I've had minimal contact with, or, not like every day. Edie Mondene is on our board, owns Post Shines, lives in the floodplain, has a business, Black-owned business. But so I probably had the closest connection with him, but I'm fully supportive of the board and or anybody else that says, oh, I know Sam L. Miller because he's a representative of the Seoul Business District Association. Maybe they have I think my question before was, I don't know who else would have contact, and they might have better than I.
That's absolutely great, Mary Helen, and I see your name there a lot, and so you've done your share. We really appreciate that. And if more than one person, the staff are fully capable of working that out, so we don't inundate a person with a bunch of folks. But I really would, first of all, like to gauge their interest, and then secondly, have perhaps a connection with a board member to see, so they can ask questions perhaps and get familiar. And then if there's more than two, then this board is going to have to do some work to figure out who you'd like to appoint. And maybe we cross that bridge when we come to it. Eric, you had a hand up.
Yes. Is it important that they be in a not-for-profit currently?
They have to be associated with a nonprofit in some fashion according to the positional arrangements in the statute.
And I guess I would defer to Hong on some of this, but I would assume if they are connected to the nonprofit in any way, if they could just have them, if they're designated to represent them, I don't think they necessarily need to be an employee or a board member or volunteer, but if they're associated and they have authority to represent them, then I think that should be fine.
Long says you're absolutely right, Emily.
So you just need some sort of a letter or an email or something that says, yes, as this nonprofit, we think this person's good. But I think the question is it okay for staff to reach out to these people to gauge interest? And if so, then we will connect them up with board members to try and close the deal. But I didn't want to call people without permission. I take this really seriously in the differential between staff and board. So.
Okay, seeing no objections and some thumbs up.
Okay, we will endeavor to get in touch with these people in the first 2 weeks of January and be prepared to come back to you at your January meeting with an update on interest.
Sounds great.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to give you a couple of other updates. I know we're over time. I did have the opportunity to travel to Washington, D.C. at the beginning of the month as part of my service on the National Association of Flood and Stormwater Management Agencies. We had the opportunity to meet with senior officials from FEMA and from the Corps of Engineers, and I had the opportunity to meet with members of Oregon's congressional delegation staff. And what I'd like to say is I think we are very well positioned to receive additional funding from the Corps and from FEMA for our work, and that the Oregon congressional delegation is very enthusiastic about supporting us, and they will be reaching out to the Office of Management and Budget and the Biden administration to try and help us win support for the Corps share of funding. And as Evan mentioned earlier, we are working cooperatively with the City of Portland, thanks to James and others, to get some FEMA funding for pump stations and others. So I think things are going well on that end. Again, you never know what Congress is going to do. The other thing that I want to talk to you about is we've made progress in hiring a new board coordinator. Emily and I are meeting with 2 finalists this week and hope to have an idea about how to move forward with that position. We're also in the final throes of interviewing another operations and maintenance technician to add to our operations team, which is really great. And finally, the MCDD board had included a 4% increase in salaries for our team. And we are implementing that in the form of a cost of living allowance as of January 1st. So your future employees will be seeing a 4% COLA in the second paycheck in January. And with that, I think given the time, I'm going to stop.
Well, want to appreciate all the staff and all the work. Holidays are a good time to reflect. We've covered a lot of ground this year, and that in most part is due to great staff work. And I also want to acknowledge the board and all of your work. And, this has been noted through many years as one of the most collaborative intergovernmental organizations that this state's ever seen. And I think it continues in the form of the work of the board members on this group. I'm really proud to be associated with all of you, and I hope you get some time off over the holidays. I hope you spend time with family and friends and loved ones, and come back in January refreshed, because you're going to work your tails off again for another year. So really, really appreciate everybody's work. And oh, by the way, last thing, just so I don't forget, the interview things for the board coordinator, as long as I'm sentenced here, Emily is sentenced here. I'm sorry she'll never leave, but I'm kidding.
I agree with that.
All right.
I'll be here.
You guys have a great holiday. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks to all of you for your work
Thank
and
you.
feedback and support for this effort. I really do. It wouldn't happen without you guys. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks. See you.
Happy holidays.
Yeah.